It's a new season. We've had the gale force winds blowing all night and blowing some old stuff away. But there's no way, after hearing what I've got to share with you this morning, that you can never think there's any hope left. Because if it can change me and save me and redeem me and cleanse me and set me free from the life that I led, it can change anybody. Any circumstance, any situation. There's nothing that I've done. It's just what God has done within me. As we were worshipping, I really felt there was somebody crying out in the night in anguish, as if the walls of darkness were just engulfing them. And it was really, really clear. You know, and sometimes we can get really trapped in heaviness and depression and thinking we can't go on anymore. And if that's you, I believe that God wants to set you free from that today. I won't just give stuff willy-nilly. I believe that was a clear picture of somebody who was crying out in anguish in the middle of the night, either frightened, alone, ashamed, upset, and as if the walls are just coming in on them in the darkness. If that's for you, then we can talk about it. So I was, 20 years in and out of prisons. I was classed as a violent offender. I was segregated the majority of the time from the main prison population because of my extreme violence. I hurt people on a daily basis. I'd stabbed people, I'd spat at people, I'd kicked and punched and rebelled my way through life because I was completely broken. As a young child growing up, I was sexually abused in the home. I was beaten with a stick. I was dominated and made to feel frightened all the time. There was a particular little room in my house that even as a grown man, the thought of that room turned me to, I'd shake. And it had such a hold and such a fear over me that it took over my life. So as a young child, I used to just kind of find solace in the local woods and find places where I could hide. One place that I used to run to when I'd had a real beating was down to our local church. And I didn't know God, I didn't know Jesus, I didn't know why I went there, I just felt safe. And then at school we used to have RE teachers, and in those lessons I used to have strange attachments to the RE teachers because I was drawn to them, because they had something in them that I felt safe and secure around. And then at 14 years old, I went to bed on bonfire night, 1992. And I came down the morning and I found my mum dead on the settee. She'd had a cerebral hemorrhage. And I lived on my own with my mum. My dad had left when I was just a tiny baby. My two sisters were a lot older than me. They'd grown up and left. So this was my whole life, just went before my eyes. Yes, there was violence in the house. Yes, there'd been things that had happened within my childhood that I was frightened of, but she was all I knew and loved. And as much as there was chastisement, there was a lot of love as well. You know, my mum had grown up chastised with a stick by my granddad. And her mum had died when she was a 3-year-old. She had to bring her brothers up as like the mum of them and to protect them from the dad getting them, because he was a predator and he used to harm them. So she used to put herself before her brothers. She lost her first husband just after the war. Her second husband was a violent Scotsman who battered her within an inch of her life on a day-to-day basis for the next 20 years. She escaped from him through my dad. And my dad came onto the scene, 10 years her junior, slick back hair, 3-piece suit, Jack the Lad, whisked her off her feet, made her feel beautiful and special. And then I was born, and 8 months later he just decided to leave the family home. So by the time I was growing up, she was chronically depressed. She used to sit in the rocking chair doing the knitting with her lip going like this and just crying. And I never knew what was the matter with her. And it used to make me angry because I'm like, what's up with you, what's the matter? Oh, just memories, son, just memories, son. And the household was like that on a day-to-day basis. And like I say, I used to escape onto the woods and different things. When I found her on the settee that day, I vowed that I would never be a victim again. That I'd never ever be a victim again. And the next person who tried to hit me, I lashed out at him. And for the first time in my life, I felt fear. I saw fear on somebody else. I didn't feel frightened no more. And it kind of gave me a bit of a thrill, or a bit of power, or just something different to what I was used to. So then I started to fight, got thrown out of school, got introduced to the local people who were, let's say, they were just using soft drugs. They kind of took me under the wing. I was desperate looking for people who could kind of guide me and be around. My sisters tried the best they could do with a teenage boy, but one of them I thought they were square, and the other one, my other brother-in-law, for 2 years psychologically just traumatized me. He made me feel I was worthless, because as soon as I went in to live in his household, it was like a clash of alpha males, and he wasn't the man of his house anymore. So my sister, for instance, would make me sandwiches for school, but not make his snap. So he felt that he wasn't loved, or she didn't like him as much as she liked me, and he used to say weird things about us and our family because we were a loving, caring, cuddly family. He used to call us weird and all this kind of stuff. So over the next 2 or 3 years, he ground me down. But I was determined that I wasn't going to let him beat me, and I vowed then I was just going to be a rugby player. Because as soon as I'd picked a ball up at 12 years old, I was gifted. And by 17 years old, I signed professional terms with Sheffield Eagles, which were fantastic. I'd been thrown out of school, I'd lost my mum, I'd been through the trauma with my brother-in-law, I had all this childhood stuff, and I signed this contract, and I got a cheque for thousands of pounds. I can remember getting into the car with my friend, and like waving check at him, come on, let's go out. And that started the decline of me, because I had too much money and no sense. And I went straight party, and I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be wanted and the only people that seemed to want me and need me were the guys in the pub, or my friends. My sister used to run pubs as well. So growing up, from living at her house, we used to stay at the pub. And for me, that was brilliant, because I used to get away from my brother-in-law. But I used to stay at the pub, and I'd sneak down in the cellar and then just pour myself drinks, and started to kind of get the taste for alcohol. And I used to watch the guys in the pub and try and emulate them, the way they walked, the way they acted. Started watching all the gangster films, and thought a man had to be tough. He had to fight. He had to sleep around. He had to beat people up. He had to arm wrestle. I had a misconception of what a man really was. So I tried to emulate these men in the pub. And they all took me under the wing. Oh, look, young Alan, and ruffle my hair and give me £20 and send me off, running. And I used to oh yeah, they like me. So I started to fight. And by the age of 18, I had a fight in a nightclub, hurt somebody quite badly, and got sent to prison for the first time as a young offender, 18 years old, with a professional rugby league contract. The club came into the prison and cancelled my contract. Within the space of 18 months, I was begging on the streets of London as a raging heroin and crack addict. I was introduced to heroin in prison. It took the pain away initially, straight away. I was floating, and I didn't stop using it. I got out, bumped into somebody in the community who I'd been locked up with, took it again, and within less than 6 months, I'd lost the house. I'd stripped the radiators, the boiler out of it, just sold all the clothes, the jewellery, the cars, everything that meant anything had gone. I had a little baby girl, and when she was born, I was sat in a crack house, and I couldn't go to see the birth because they said if you turn up, they're going to arrest you. And I was like, how on earth have I gone from a professional rugby player to a crack and heroin addict? And I was on the streets of London in a place called the Strand. So it was quite an affluent area in London. And by day it was like Millionaire's Row. And by night it's just full of sleeping bags. and St. John's and different people coming to try and help you. I had one shoe, one trainer. My feet were rotting off. I was injecting drugs. I was a complete and utter mess. And thankfully, I got sentenced to 4 years in prison. Once I got sentenced and started that prison sentence off, I knew I had to make some determined changes because I was an absolute wreck. And I got a picture of my baby daughter, stuck it on my cell wall, and I just started to train and get back fit. I'd left school with no qualifications, so I went and re-educated myself, but left with 46 qualifications, retrained up. I did 2.5 years in custody, fighting all the way, hitting people, lashing out. Although I wanted to change, this anger just burnt up inside of me, and this pain just got stronger and stronger. And I just used to hit out more and more and more. So I was released from the prison, but I was still a prisoner mentally. And my message today really is about what does freedom mean to you? Because you can be mentally imprisoned by past mistakes, past choices, past traumas, past hurts, stuff that's going off now can hold you locked in a mental place that you don't have to be in. And I said to myself, I'm going back to rugby. And I got re-signed as a semi-pro for our local hometown club. And again, everyone's like, oh, he made it, he's done well, back into rugby and everything else. But same again, all I wanted to do was be around people that wanted me. And the only guys that wanted me then were the people who wanted the drug debt collecting, or they wanted me to go and kick a door off and beat somebody up for them. Or I used to work on the security as a bouncer because that's what a lot of the rugby players did, so it'd stop them going out drinking. And we were only part-time, so it used to top our wages up. So all these choices I was making was all stemmed around violence, and to be fair, rugby will legalise violence. So I fit in like a glove. The season finished. I came home, me and my girlfriend, I got back with my girlfriend and my baby. We were having a drink with one of my best friends. I went to the shop, I came back, and I caught them together on the settee. And I absolutely it just destroyed me, because the whole purpose for me of getting off of heroin, getting out of prison, and turning my life around was to get my little girl and my girlfriend back. That was my whole focus. And I achieved that, got back to rugby, got my family back, because that's all I desperately wanted was the family. Got it back together, but in that one foul swoop, I lost my best friend and my girlfriend, and I stormed out the house. And I went on a rampage then that probably lasted about 15 years. I just didn't stop. And something changed that day where my heart had become hard. Like a big wall had just come up. I thought, no one's ever getting in there again. And I vowed no one were going to hurt me again. So at 14, the wall had gone up. I weren't going to be a victim. At that age, at 23, I think I was, no one's going to ever get into those places again, especially not a partner. So I kind of then got stuck on a wheel, just going round and round and round, just taking drugs, selling drugs, beating people up, getting people running around the estate selling drugs for me, kind of thinking I was this big, hard, tough gangster. I became nasty, horrible, bullying, intimidating guy that I'd walk in the street and people would cross over the road. I'd walk into a pub and people would just walk out. If I went for a meal at a restaurant, it'd empty. And I kind of got this weird kick from that, as if I was something special. And it just became a horrible lifestyle. And this kept going on, back to prison, back out, 3 failed relationships, 3 children. I weren't a dad to any of them. It was all about me, what I wanted to do. The world owes me a favour. This has happened to me, this has happened to me, this has happened to me. I had this big chip on my shoulder. I was completely lost, ashamed of myself, abandoned anything that I cared about. I pushed everybody away. My sisters didn't speak to me. My nieces and nephews thought I was a waster. My great nieces were born and grew up and didn't know me. My whole, everyone in the community just used to, they were frightened. To frighten people. I had a caring heart, and I used to take everyone's problems on and feel like, oh, let me try and have a bit of a fixer. But it were always really just so I could get the thrill and kick out of violence. And then 10 years ago, looking back, I think that was a key part where there was a huge change. It was Father's Day 2008, and I was trying to get hold of my friend, my best friend, for 2 days, and I just couldn't get hold of him. And it weren't like him. We were meant to meet up on the Saturday morning, and I think there's a scripture that says some people can be closer than a brother. And this he was my best mate, but I loved him like a brother. And together we was a formidable force. We were angry. He was a cage fighter. He was a millionaire. He had a business owner. He had all the stuff that the world could give him. But I kicked his door off and found him sat in his own wee and poo with his throat cut, an inch thick of blood. He took his own life. He left behind 2 beautiful children, a business, a family, and the ripple effect of that one night just is still going on today. I mean, his grown-up children now are struggling with the aftermath of the legacy of what their dad's done. His mum, I don't know if it's a clinical term, but I believe she died of a broken heart. She died within a month of his passing. So we had 2 funerals within a month, the son and the mother. The dad is a wreck and lives on his own, just, full of guilt for what had happened between them. And I remember standing on the top of his stairs, looking at my best friend sat, with a hole in his neck, just thinking, what? And I had this flashing image of my mum on the settee, and it was as if in slow motion my life just went before me with all the bad stuff that had happened in between mum dying and this scenario. I stood on the top of the steps, and I thought, I've got to change. I had a light bulb moment in the weirdest of situations, stood on the top of the steps looking at my dead friend. But I knew I had to change, else that was going to be me. There was a pile of money next to him, a pile of cocaine, a rolled up £20 note. The money that I'd give him on the Friday night was still there, all piled up. He had Jeep outside, cars outside, 10 properties, millions in the bank, big building company. He used to cage fight, and everyone thought he was the hardest man that walked the earth. And none of us knew. He was broken, he was damaged, and in his darkest hour, he cut his own jugular. And I thought, nah, this is crazy. So something had to change. But how do you change when that's all you know? 20 years in prisons, 20 years taking drugs, selling drugs, beating people up. By then, the rugby was a long gone history. It's a what could, just if, what if, but if. All those, what could have been, all those little things that when you're there and you go into a pub and you're a bit drunk and everyone, oh, I can remember when you had wheeled at your feet and all that lot. Then I'd snarl and growl at them because it used to hurt me, because it brought back these memories of what could have, should have been. So on those stairs that day, I said, things have got to change. I've got to make some changes. I've got to step out and try and change. So I went on an anger management course through the Doncaster Mind Centre, it was called. And I remember sitting on this course. I thought, oh yeah, this is really useful. This is really good. It's going to really help me now. I'm not going to hit nobody again. I went out for the dinner time break, saw this guy who had ripped us off for some money, chased him through the town and beat him up. Then went back on the course in the afternoon, and it was like, I don't think this is going to work. I really don't. I don't think it's going to work. This is crazy. And I told them, I said, look, I've just beat somebody up. I don't think this course is working. He says, Alan, I think it's a bit, you have to be a bit different from that. And I knew then that I couldn't do it in my strength. There was nothing that I could do to change. So I started going to the spiritualist church and getting readings and going to spiritual fairs, trying to communicate with my friend, because I needed all these answers and all this stuff that had happened, and I kind of got sucked into this world for about 1.5 years of desperately needing to see a sign and confirmation that these people, because one of the mediums said she had my mum with her, and her mum, I could cuddle my mum again if I just held her, and all this garbage that came with it, and it just messed with my head. I was under psychiatrists, psychologists, on tablets, drinking every single day, smoking as much weed as I could possibly smoke, to just try and numb this dullness that was inside me. And then 7 years ago, completely broken, completely lost, in a prison cell, I asked God, if you're real, if you're with me, and you're hearing my cries, replace the pigeons outside my window for a white dove. And the reason why I asked for this is because I was paranoid, I was delusional, and I needed concrete, clear proof that God was with me, that God was hearing my prayers, and that he was real because of the delusions I was facing. I didn't kill myself because I got to that place where I planned to take an overdose. I thought, I can't live with who and what I've become anymore. I went to sleep. Thankfully, I didn't take the overdose. I got up in the morning. I went to the window, and I stood there staring out of it, leant on the window, just watching the world go by. And then in slow motion, the pigeons lifted up and the dove sat down, and something inside me jumped, and I just knew without a shadow of a doubt that that was the message, that was the sign, that was the symbol, that was clarity. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't pretend, it wasn't a game, it wasn't anything. It was real because it was just so poignant, because it was exactly what I'd asked for, but inside I just knew in my heart, God's real. He loves me, and he's with me. That's all I need. So I came running out the cell. There is a God, there is a God. And everyone on the wing just cracked out laughing, and, think, oh, he's finally lost the plot now. He's gone cuckoo. But something dramatic had happened. I'd had a life-changing encounter in a prison cell with a symbol of a dove. But then I got shipped out to Leeds on a security move, and when I got to Leeds there, I could be the real me. I didn't have to put this act on because I had a nickname, Bangam Langham, in the jail, and knew all the staff and knew all the lads, and kind of it got a bit. I couldn't just let that guard down. I had to be this tough, hard man. And I went to Leeds prison, and within that prison, I started to read the Bible. And the first thing that started to happen is the tears started to fall. And somebody said to me, Alan, it's all right. Tears are words unspoken. Let them speak. And I sat there just writing all these memories and all these pains and all this stuff out, and then just throwing it away. And I was reading this book called Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. And I got to this point about the abuse and how she dealt with it. And she balled it up into a ball and put it at the feet of Jesus. And that's how she overcame it. So I thought, you know what, I need to do this with my rage. Because I'm not just angry, I flip out and I hurt people all the time. And I balled up the rage. I put it at Jesus' feet and I give it to him. I woke up the next morning and it was as if my heart had turned a waterfall on. And all this hardness just broke. And this gushing of love and just waves coming over like I was floating on air. And to this day, I've never hit anybody again. 8 years down the line, I've never committed an offence. I've never beaten anybody up. I never hurt anybody. It took instantaneously, overnight, in such a dramatic, profound way. The rest of the journey has been a journey. And I've had to go through a process. And I've had to be delivered and set free from piece after piece after piece. The broken pieces of my psychology and my heart and my emotions have had to be pieced back together bit by bit. And it says in the scriptures that I've come to bind up the broken hearted. So there has to be a process of putting the heart back together, to set the captives free. I was captive to drugs, to addiction, to violence. As a womanizer, a whole piece of work. But God set me free from all that in the split of an eye. And then took me on this incredible journey where my children got restored into my life one by one in age order. I built up companies, I won awards, I wrote a book. And all this life of hatred and anger and bitterness and the ness of life was replaced by peace and joy and love and an ability to reach people, ability to help people. We did outreach programs for the homeless, going into prisons, speaking to prisoners, you know, going into the hospitals and praying for the sick, and all the different things that has happened on this incredible journey. But it started within a prison cell as a broken man on the floor about to take his own life, just dishevelled and didn't think he could go on anymore. But in his mercies, by his grace, Jesus came in, got me by the scruff of the neck and said, come on, you're coming with me. And I accepted him into my heart as my Lord, my Saviour, and let him do the process. Let him do the binding of the heart. Let him set the captive free. And I am not without fault. Far from it. I get things wrong all the time. But I know in my darkest hours, when I'm crying in those anguished cries in the night, and it feels like the walls are coming in, I can call on Jesus. That little scared little boy who was battered and abused, we went through a time of healing where Jesus came into the room and took my hand. And that memory went. The memory of my mum laid there on the settee. Jesus came into that room, took my hand, and it went. And that was the healing and the restoration that only he can give. The anger management course didn't work, but Jesus did. And he came and he set a violent, horrible, nasty man free from all that to a loving, caring, decent guy. These hands that used to break bones, they now heal the sick. The same voice that used to threaten and intimidate people tries to give hope. The children that I was no longer a father to, I am now the dad. My sisters speak to me. My dad's in my life. My nieces, great nieces, new great nephew, just 3 days old, held him at the hospital the other day. You know, it's the family unit's been restored. Only Jesus could do that. You know, and it's far from perfect. It's a strained relationship with my dad, and it's tough, but we've got a relationship, and we're working through it. And it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes faith. You know, there's so much stuff that's happened that I know without a shadow of a doubt, oh, it's got to be real. Of course it is. But there might be people here who think, you know, I don't know about this God stuff. You know, church are full of hypocrites. Church is this and all this kind of stuff that's said. But it's true, we are, because we're all broken people who need a Saviour. That's why we're here. We're broken. But we come here collectively, and the one thing I love about this church today is there's just a unity of family here. It feels like just a family. And I sat there worshiping with the peace of God just came on me, and I thought, this is a family, this. And when you've been broken and you've come from a brokenness, you need family. So all the people in here who ain't got mums and dads, there's mums and dads here for you. For those that have been through the stuff I've talked about, there's people here that can help. But I just want you today to, you know, to make a conscious decision that whatever it is that I'm facing, whatever it is I'm going through, and whatever it is that I need to change, starts here and now today. Don't leave it. Don't walk out of here today the same. It would be a waste. God hasn't done this work in me for nothing. He's done it so I can give you the simple message, there is hope. And that hope comes in Christ Jesus. So if you're struggling with addiction, Jesus. If you've been abused, Jesus. If you've been beaten, Jesus. If you've lost people, Jesus. If you're ill and infirm, Jesus. If you've got no money, Jesus. If you can't eat, Jesus. He is the answer to everything that we're going through. And it's not easy. I'm not going to say, oh, look, you come to Jesus and everything's going to be fine. But what I'm saying is you've got a family here who can love on you, who can walk that mile with you, take you by the hand. If they have to take you by the scruff of the neck, I think they will do as well. You know, I think, and that's sometimes what we need. And to be told, listen, this is not the way. And I've had some key people in my life that have molded me into shape, because when I first stepped into a church for the first time, you know, I was all over the place. I'd had a massive encounter and I didn't want to hit nobody, but I had a bag of weed in my pocket. I'd been on a 3-day bender on the drink and I was a mess. But as soon as the music come on, I started to cry and I threw my hands in the air and I thought, I don't know how you're going to do this, but you're going to change me. I got baptized about 4 weeks later. There were 96 of us, got baptized, and this a beautiful day. And my eldest daughter came with me, you know, and she surrendered her life to the Lord. It was like one of the special days that you never forget, you know. And I knew that when I went under that water, the old had gone and the new had come up as I stood up, and I threw my hands in the air. I picked the pastor up and spun him around, and it was like everyone said, "Who on earth is this guy?" I was so rough around the edges and so all over the place, but something significant had happened in my heart. I had a deep heart transplant, and God had gone into a depths of my soul and changed me. You know, like I say, I haven't drunk or took drugs or done all the other stuff for years and years now. But it took time, and it took a process, and it took key people telling me, listen, you can't do this stuff, and correcting me and guiding me. And I'd push them away, or I'd get offended and leave a church and all this different kind of stuff. But over the journey and over the time, God's molded me into something that He can use for His glory. So I just want to encourage anybody that's struggling today, please don't leave here the same. If God can come into a 20-year career criminal's life, a drug addict, violent nutter, signed off by the psychiatrist, and turn him into a loving, caring man of God, what can He do in your life? He could do absolutely anything.
Then came the morning, I sealed the promise.